Candace Bushnell is an author, journalist, and television producer. Born in Connecticut, she moved to New York at a very early age. After modeling, she began working with various women's magazines, eventually landing at Vogue and finally the New York Observer. Bushnell began writing for the New York Observer in 1983. She created a humor column based on her personal experiences. In 1987, Bushnell's columns were published in an anthology called Sex and the City, and soon after became a television series. The series was created by Darren Star. Almost all of the events narrated in the series take place on the streets of New York, a city in eternal motion, chaotic and deeply alive, so as to be called the fifth protagonist of the show. The heart of the New York is where Carrie and her friends live, always looking for the hottest club and the hottest party of the moment. The series chronicles the romantic and sexual lives of four single friends and deals with socially relevant topics such as the status of women in society and their role in the family. Carrie Bradshaw, the protagonist and the narrating self of each episode, which is structured around the articles she writes for her newspaper column, Sex and the City. In them, she talks about men, sex, and romantic relationships. Blonde, curly-haired, intelligent, and cheerful, she loves fashion. She is in search of total love, ridiculous, uncomfortable, exhausting, that consumes you and makes you think of nothing else. Miranda Hobbs, a successful lawyer, has a very cynical view of men and relationship and is Carrie's best friend. Charlotte York is a gallery owner and is the most conservative of the four friends. Her ideal relationship is based on the rules of love and dating. She firmly believes in true love and is constantly looking for Prince Charming. Samantha Jones is the oldest of the group and owns a public relations agency. A seductress and libertine, she has a deep distrust of love towards men, but firmly believes in love for her friends. But for those who think they will find exactly the TV series in the book, they are wrong. Here are the main differences in which the series deviated from Candace Bushnell's famous column. Perhaps the most important thing to know about the book is that it is not a novel, but rather a collection of essays. What makes reading the book tiring is that there are no stories to follow. It rather proceeds by topics, all of which are covered through the telling of the experiences of the various characters. Also, the Sex and the City book inspired the first season of the television series of the same name. The narrative begins exactly like the first episode of the series, namely by describing the first love experience of an English woman who has just moved to New York. Unlike the first episode of the series, however, there is no presentation of Carrie as a narrator of the story. In fact, the identity of the omniscient narrator remains hidden. Only later in the book is Carrie introduced as a friend of the narrator, whose story begins to intertwine with those of the other characters. This might come as a shock, but in the book, Carrie is not the main character. She is just one of many, and she doesn't have a particularly close relationship like she does in the series. And in fact, Miranda, Charlotte, and Samantha, who we have come to know and love on TV, are virtually unrecognizable in the book. Charlotte is not a puritanical American, but in the book she is the English journalist who, after a disappointment of love, realized that in New York there is no room for romance, so she willingly moves from one man to another, enjoying the infinite possibilities that the city offers. The cynical lawyer of the series, Miranda, is a television executive and not a lawyer. She appears very little in the book. She and Carrie are friends but don't have a strong bond. In the book, as in the series, Samantha has several sexual partners, but her talk about sex, which in the series is an ever-present and funny part, is missing in the book. Moreover, the bond she has with Carrie is light years away from the one of the series. One of the biggest differences between the book and the show is that on the small screen, all four of our main characters are meant to be sympathetic characters. Even if they occasionally make missteps, at the end of the day it's easy to fall in love with them. In the book, however, Bushnell doesn't shy away from making Carrie and the rest of her team totally unlikable. While on TV we are supposed to believe she always means well, that's not the case on paper. Also inspired by the book is the relationship Carrie has with Mr. Big. Carrie and Big's relationship also has some differences from the series. In the first series, the relationship between Carrie and Mr. Big doesn't seem serious. They choose each other, but don't spend much time together because Big is very elusive. Instead, in the book, much more space is given to their life together, their outings and weekends. Carrie even introduced Big to his family. Also, at the end of the first series, Carrie and Big break up because he can't tell her he loves her. In the book, Carrie and Big fight, but they don't break up because despite his fears, Big confesses to Carrie that he loves her and doesn't want to lose her. Considering the fact that almost every episode of Sex and the City features a memorable love scene, you might be surprised to hear that despite the title, sex doesn't feature heavily in the book. When it does, it's almost never a good thing, which we imagine is a theme that runs through the series as well. But while the intercourse scenes in the series range from funny to romantic, the book gives a negative view of the sex life of single people, often used as a way to simply avoid being alone.
We do the Botox. Have you thought about a freshening chemical peel? It takes 15 minutes and it can make you look 10 to 20 years younger.
One of the reasons Sex and the City is considered groundbreaking is because it's focused on women over 35, who are unmarried and childless, at least when the series began. Aging is a big part of the characters' journeys in the series, but it is often looked at with a certain amount of anxiety. Whereas in the book, aging is something that is greeted with gratitude rather than fear. The oft-stated moral in the series is to work on your relationship with yourself, but the characters of the series don't exactly practice what they preach, and in the end, all four women are happily in a couple. The book is much more cynical about relationships, with Bushnell stating at one point, "Relationships in New York are based on detachment." The characters in the book are much less interested in settling down and in truly embrace the single life more naturally. The series tend to be fun and bubbly, focusing heavily on fashion with lots of shopping and show-buying montages. The book, on the other hand, is deeper, and the characters live in a much more real version of New York that seems like a distressing place to run away from on the run, where drugs and alcohol reign supreme and where women are a difficult life to say the least. Unlike the series where New York is still a chaotic metropolis, but one that generates pleasant and thrilling situations. I think all or most have seen the TV series. The creator, in fact, is considered a true genius. About the book, however, opinions are more discordant, and we can say with certainty that the majority didn't like it because it's too distant from the glossy atmosphere of the show. But on the contrary, there are also those who, like me, enjoyed finding all the similarities and differences that can be found in Sex and the City.